Hi there, welcome to the BTEC Nationals in Music Performance, Unit 2 Professional Practice in the Music Industry Support Session. My name is Jeffrey Hull. I am Subject Advisor for Music and Music Technology. In this, we will cover looking at the task, details around the project plan, the budget, rationale, and the presentation. Then there are some useful links to look at as well. So the task is a scenario in which musicians might find themselves in a position to bid for a specific role. There are 3 hours of research time, then there are 5 hours to complete the task. There's 4 activities within the task, which is a project plan worth 20 marks, the budget worth 15 marks, the rationale worth 20 marks, and the presentation worth 15 marks, giving 70 marks in total. Learners should read the task and make sure they understand what's required of them. They need to be able to research and understand the role in detail. Make sure that learners understand all parts involved with each activity linked to the scenario, and make sure that they are aware of how they can go off and research the material that they need to help them complete the activities. In some of the briefs, there is usually the term local area or something like that used, and where that term local is used, it's guided to use your local area to inform the things that would be needed in terms of the research, the activities, the venues, bands, etc. So the project plan. Job roles in the brief are taken from the specification. So those job roles in there will be the ones listed in the specification, and learners can go off and research those after the brief has been released. Centres are encouraged to arrange hands-on practical experience for learners to engage with the job roles. So actually running some mock assessments or setting up tasks where they actually take on these job roles and work with each other to create and interact with the job roles to create a task or an activity is encouraged and a good way for learners to get that practical experience and knowledge around what each job role does and how they interact with other roles in the industry. Learners need to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding of the music industry in the task, and that comes across in the 4 activities. Learners need to provide specific details in their plans rather than give generalised comments. So they need to be able to go into details about how they're planning to meet the brief and give specific details around items that they need and how they plan to approach that. The plan does need to be realistic, considering the constraints within the brief as well. So learners should be thinking about what the brief is really asking for, what their limitations are within the brief, because there are generally a budget to work within. It gives details around if it's in a specific area, and learners need to think about that and consider how they can meet that within their plan. Learners need to explore the scenario in detail. So some of the information could be explicit in the brief, or other things could be implied, and they are things that will allow the learner to show the deeper understanding. So, for an example, if they've been asked to plan a live music stage for a small festival in the town, they might consider arranging for a stage manager to be in that task and in that activity. Although it wasn't required in the brief to have a stage manager, it shows that they're showing their deeper understanding of the scenario and understanding of how that event could run and what could help run that event smoothly. They need to be able to foresee problems and suggest solutions as well. So in this scenario of a live music stage, they could consider things such as having security or passes or wristbands for musicians and backstage crew. So then it's easy to see who should be allowed in certain areas as well. So that is looking at the problems that could come up and suggesting solutions around how they meet those and deal with those problems. They need to come up with creative ideas to make their proposal stand out as well. But obviously consider what's feasible and suitable for the scenario and the constraints within that brief as well. Looking on to activity 2, the budget. There are always certain things that are asked for in the brief to be included on the budget, and learners need to include all that information requested in the task. They also need to include other relevant details in there as well. So, for example, they could budget in there for a small office space to work in and include the cost of a laptop and a desk and a chair, because in order to meet the role, they would need a space to work in and the equipment to do this. And budgeting that into the cost of their proposal would show that they're thinking about the wider circumstances and what would need to be considered. Tables need to be clear and summed correctly. So therefore, learners do need to have some knowledge of spreadsheets and how to create these. And that's encouraged to teach that during teaching and learning. It's also suggested that you could use colleagues from subjects like business or IT to help you with this, because obviously they have experience of this, may have resources that could help you. They could even help in delivering some of the content around this to help your learners. It's possible to use multiple tables for clarity and to present the information so it's clear to an examiner the costs, the expenditure and the income that is on the spreadsheet and in the budget. Learners need to justify their expenses. So they need to look at why particular expenditure items were selected. Think about the benefits of that item compared to other similar items and why they're making those choices. Think about how this supports the overall aims of the brief and their plan, and explain why other options weren't selected as well. To be realistic, learners should consider factoring in a certain percentage of unsold tickets or items, because that is a realistic expectation that a live gig, for example, would not sell out. They need to factor in that they may not sell all of the tickets, and that would show that deeper understanding in there in terms of the budget and considering the income and expenditure. Looking at the rationale, learners need to justify the elements of the proposal apart from the budget, because obviously they've justified a lot of things with that budget as well. Learners need to explain and justify their creative vision. The thing to say is copying and pasting information directly from their project plan isn't likely to score well. They need to go into detail about the decisions that they're making and explain why they're taking one approach and maybe not another. They need to consider the feasibility of the plan, justify each of the decisions in that project plan, and explain why they chose the approach that they're taking to the plan and maybe not another approach. There are different ways that they could consider in terms of approaching the plan and working towards creating that plan and their proposal, and they should think about why they've chosen a certain route and options rather than any others. Presentation. It's encouraged to use the maximum number of slides to give more opportunity to demonstrate understanding and knowledge. Create slides that are fit for purpose. It doesn't need to have bespoke design or over-the-top designs to be eye-catching. Simple layout and a template would be sufficient. Learners need to think about the size of the font and colours included on there. And linked to, I suppose, the size of the font is also about don't provide too much text on each slide. It needs to be read easily to the intended audience. It's encouraged to use headings with a few sentences or bullet points to keep the information clear on the slides, and then use the presenter notes to go into the more detail and have the information built in through the presenter notes rather than trying to include too much detail on a slide. Learners need to include all the elements listed as being required for the activity. So that is listed in the brief, and learners need to make sure that they are covering this. They aren't expected to have additional ideas beyond the listed areas in the brief, so it keeps it focused in terms of the information that needs to be in the presentation. The slides need to be structured in a logical progression, and that could follow the information required that's given in the brief. There is the possibility to sort of detail it in terms of things that they've outlined in the project plan and go through things in that way. But they need to make sure that the information flows logically in that presentation. It's encouraged to use the front and end slide. So a title, an introductory slide, and then a slide that is either a thank you or is for questions at the end, because you don't want to end the presentation just on the information that's on that final slide. They should use the slides to summarise points, and as I've said, don't include too much detail where it wouldn't be appropriate on the slide. Trying to make sure that they are presenting clear information. It's not recommended to copy and paste any sections from activities 1 to 3, particularly the budget, because having copy and pasted tables from the budget and onto a slide isn't giving clear information. It's very difficult to see things in that way. Having lists of the main items for income and expenditure, and then talking about those in more detail, and having that detail in the presenter notes as they would talk through it, is a good way to approach that. Obviously, make sure that there are presenter notes for each of the main slides that has the more detail that goes into that from the bullet points and the information presented on the slide. And learners need to ensure that that is saved with the presenter notes included when they create the saved file. Write presenter notes with a specific audience in mind. So it's written to sell their idea to that audience, and it should be addressed to that audience as well. There are some useful links that I will point you towards as well. So there are examiner reports for each series. This contains examples of work and commentary on the marks achieved and why. And it also highlights good practice from centres generally for the exam series. So there is a link to the June 23 examiner report there. There's sample mark learner work available online. Again, that has commentary on why work has achieved certain marks. There's a guidance document for saving the slides as a PDF and including the presenter notes. So there is guidance on how to do that. And a really important document is the administrative support guide. That gives all the details on how to run the assessment and the expectations on that as well. On this slide, here are my contact details. So there's various ways to get in contact with me. There is the contact page on the website. You can email me using teachingmusic@pearson.com. There's the phone number. There is the Pearson Music community page, which is the next link there. And then finally, there is a link to my bookings page, which will allow you to book a 10-minute video call with me to ask any questions or clarify anything that you'd like as well. Finally, I'd like to say I hope you found this useful and wish you luck with assessments moving forward.